gathered with us tonight for a webinar presentation on growing Halifax's cycling network that we are putting on as part of Winter Bike Week. My name is David McIsaac. I work for Halifax Regional Municipality as the Active Transportation Program Supervisor. We have behind the scenes, we got a few people kind of helping us learn and experiment with this new approach to communicating. So my colleague Siobhan Witherby is switching from an active transportation planner to a multimedia producer tonight behind the scenes with some support from our colleague Deanna Wilmshurst. And the session was put together, and also behind the scenes is our new colleague Chloe Kennedy. So I'm not sure if those folks will ever get any visibility tonight, but they're behind the scenes helping us put this on. Later, we'll have some presentations from my colleague Mark Neener and Megan Backus. So we're doing this as part of Winter Bike Week. The Winter Bike Week, as I suspect folks know, is organized by the Halifax Cycling Coalition. I see Halifax Public Library's logo down there, and I'm going to say this might be like the fourth or fifth time that Halifax and the Cycling Coalition have put on a Winter Bike Week. And we thank them for their efforts to organize all the events this week, and especially kind of a funny time to be organizing public events when there's difficulty gathering and that kind of thing. So so thanks to Halifax Cycling Coalition for hosting us, and we as part of putting this together, we sort of asked the Cycling Coalition what they thought would be of interest to folks attending tonight, and they suggested that we give just a quick overview and then highlight 2 or 3 projects that we are working on right now, either planning or starting to build, and you can see, I'll give a quick update on what's happening with the McDonald Bridge Bikeway Connector. Megan Backus will give an overview of a project right now to improve connectivity for people walking and bicycling to the Africville National Historic Site. And Mark Neener will talk to you about our work for Halifax to enter the world of shared micromobility, so things like e-scooters and bike share, and give you an update on where we stand with that. And then at the end, there's a question and discussion period. I think we're going to block some time off at the end for that. And I'm going to look for a nod from Siobhan or Chloe, but I think if folks have questions, there's a spot that yeah. So hopefully it's obvious where there's a text box, and feel free to pose your questions in there at any point, and maybe we'll get to them during the presentation, or maybe we will come to them at the end. So so once again, thanks for being out there, and we'll give this a try, and hopefully it'll be a great opportunity for a bit of learning and some dialogue and that kind of thing. So just a few intro slides. This is the almost full active transportation planning group. There's a lot of people working in the municipality on the design side, on the maintenance side, on traffic regulations on active transportation, but our group is the one that's most involved in planning facilities, and we work in the Transportation and Public Works Department, and we work alongside colleagues who do surveying, colleagues who are involved in the overall asset management. It says pavement management there, but we've recently changed it to more of an asset management function overall. And then also the design engineering folks who, behind the scenes, they're the engineers doing the detailed designs of a lot of the projects that excuse me, that we're constructing. And so we work with them. So, I mean, this is a question, we could do the whole presentation tonight on why active transportation is important. I would say that the municipality, if you look at our active transportation plan and the integrated mobility plan, we have, the municipality is working in lots of different ways to make it easier, safer, more comfortable for people to walk and bicycle. That's connected to our objectives around accessibility. is connected to our objectives around providing transportation options that are accessible to a wide range of people. So if you choose, or if you would like to walk, or if you choose, or you'd like or more comfortable to bicycle or take transit or drive, that we are providing options that are as accessible, as reliable, and as safe, regardless of how you choose to get around. It's also connected to our objectives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and lots of different reasons. Certainly our road safety plan puts a focus on vulnerable road users, and anyway, it's all connected. So the integrated mobility plan, you can see that slide right now. That's really, the municipality's multimodal transportation plan. I think if you look at how transportation has happened in North America, especially over the past, say, 40, 50, 60 years, you can't really argue with the fact that it's been focused on moving people in cars. Halifax, like a lot of other municipalities, is now focusing on making it possible for people to choose options that are more sustainable, take up less space on the road, and more accessible from an income perspective, from your physical abilities. So that's that's where we're heading. It's a transition. It's not happening overnight, but I think there's lots of different ways that we're making progress, and that's certainly the direction that we're heading. And this presentation will be a little bit about what some of the things are that we're doing for bicycling. So this slide kind of gives you a sense of where we've been and where lots of other cities have been in terms of bicycling infrastructure and where we're going. And you can see, Halifax and the IMP made a commitment for implementing all ages and abilities bicycling facilities. So these are facilities that if you don't bicycle now regularly, you should feel safe inside of these facilities. You should feel buffered from motor vehicles, and there should be accommodation for better intersection treatments. So on the left, you sort of have things like pavement markings, which kind of designate where bicycles should be, and maybe sort of visual indicators to motorists that to expect bikes there, but there's obviously no physical separation. So there's no room for error. It requires everybody to be watching what's happening on the road. And what we know is that's not the kind of facility that if you're not comfortable cycling now, you're not really encouraged to use that. So less of that kind of thing. Painted bike lanes. So we still have lots of painted bike lanes, and we did, build a fair, about 70 kilometers, I think, right now of painted bike lanes in the municipality. But again, that's a treatment that is no longer on most roads seen as the safest possible alternative. So what we have now is kind of our three main facility types. I should credit the city of Vancouver with creating this graphic. And so basically now our toolbox, the network that we're building, are local street bikeways, also called bicycle boulevards. So these are bicycle routes on local streets that have good connectivity, and where we are working to create kind of the environment where bicycles can share the road with other users, and where we've implemented things like traffic calming measures or measures to reduce cut through traffic to facilitate a greater kind of a safer experience. Protected bike lanes, we have a lot of these in the works right now. Places like Hollis Street, South Park, a tactical protected bike lane on Lower Water, Rainy Drive. So those are the kind of facilities where we're getting separation. And then our multi-use pathway network, which is shared bicycle pedestrian traffic. So here are just sort of here's some protected bike lanes that you're starting to see around. So on the, can we go back? Thank you. So on the left are some of the more temporary facilities. So we call these tactical protected bike lanes. These are typically put in for a period of, about 1 to 3 years, where either one, we see an opportunity to kind of get a more immediate benefit, safety benefit, and improvement on the street. And they also are ways for us to experiment and try something and learn from it. So then when we go to build the permanent facility, it benefits from having something there in operation over a number of years to learn from. In the middle, we have sort of we call them an interim kind of facility where we work kind of within the existing right of way. We don't have to dig up a lot of the street to put these in, and we sort of place precast concrete curb to kind of do this separation from the vehicles and the bicycle facility. And so what you see on Hollis Street could be there for many years, or when Hollis Street comes up for kind of a larger scale rehabilitation job in the future, you might see us sort of like pulling the curb over to kind of where you see that precast concrete curb, and create a facility what you see more like on the right there. And that is sort of a more permanent facility where the bike lane is up at the same level as the sidewalk, and more attention to streetscaping and integrating the bike lane into the overall facility. Next slide. So local street bikeways, again, this is a facility that you're just starting to see in Halifax. We're adapting this facility from positive feedback from other jurisdictions. And again, these are traffic calm streets. A key issue with these kinds of facilities that we're finding is the intersections. So local streets and crossing kind of the major streets is something that we've learned is a key design factor. The only other thing I'll say about these facilities is that as we implement them, we're learning from them and are coming back and making adjustments to sort of help us meet the speed thresholds, because we want the cars to be going at about 30 kilometers an hour. And the volume. So, we want these streets to behave in that the cars on those streets are the cars of the people who live on those streets or maybe visiting them. And that's all. And that helps set it up for a safer overall experience for people bicycling. I think next slide, Chloe. And then our network of multi-use pathways. This is sort of the facility that's been around the longest in the municipalities. They're shared bicycle pedestrian facilities, quite common in rural parts of the municipality in terms of the Rails to Trails network. This is the Dartmouth Harbourfront Greenway. Have almost 200 kilometers of these types of facilities right now. And one sort of something that's new in a good way is that we're kind of finding some of these facilities are starting to get a little bit too crowded, and other places are finding the same. So thresholds and new guidance is coming to help us decide or when we might need to separate bicycles and pedestrians. So that's something that we're starting to look at more than we have before. Next slide. So this is a little diagram or a map, I guess, of the regional center AAA bicycle network. So this was approved by council as part of the integrated mobility plan. I think there's some fancy animation here, so maybe click Chloe, and I think you can kind of see what's been built already. Yeah, so it's not easy to see, but if you see the darker lines, those are parts of the network that were in, before 2017 or that we've built already. The overall network is just over about 50 kilometers. We are right around 32 kilometers complete, and still lots of work ahead of us. But, we're kind of starting to see, certainly the segments are there, and some of the gaps are gradually getting filled in. And Yeah, so you can see sort of the total build out that we anticipate there is in terms of the darker network. Maybe the next slide, Chloe. So just a few slides. So we were asked to kind of focus in on I think 3 projects. The McDonald Bridge Bikeway Connectors project came out of the Active Transportation Priorities Plan. We went around and back in 2014 did lots of engagement and stakeholder engagement. And one of the questions we asked is, what are the priority projects? And this one here was really, I think, the #1 project priority that the public identified. And it really came out of the fact that, if you're bicycling on the McDonald Bridge, it's a fantastic place to be. You're protected, you got a great view. It's really, usually a great experience. I'd say usually, sometimes it's pretty windy. But on either end of it, it's really not great. In fact, it's actually the furthest thing almost from all ages and abilities. Lots of people talk about the Halifax side where you kind of have to go under the bridge and then climb up and it's busy traffic. So, really not a great environment, not the safest possible environment for people bicycling. And on the Dartmouth side, again, you just sort of, if you're riding a bike coming on or going off, you're in one of the busiest intersections in the municipality with really no accommodation for people bicycling. So the project looks on both sides. Lots of people like to talk about the flyover with this project, and that's an important part of it, but it's really just one part of the overall project. Next slide, I think. Yeah, so here's more or less where we are. In Dartmouth, we are almost ready to proceed to construction on the Dartmouth side, and the key elements of what we should have on Dartmouth are protected bike lanes on Wise Road on either side. Protection looking more or less like what you see on Hollis Street and maybe the part of South Park Street, south of Spring Garden Road. And then a really important part of it is how it intersects, with the bridge bikeway. So lots of minor changes, actually, reasonably significant changes to that intersection, just to kind of create the space for the bike facility, some crossings and other improvements. And one thing that doesn't really get highlighted, I think, almost enough with a lot of these bikeway projects is some of the pedestrian gains, so safety for pedestrians that happen as well. And one of the side benefits of this project is that on the pedestrian side of the McDonald Bridge, where kind of when you're on the Dartmouth side and you go past the administration building, it's really currently a really uncomfortable and not great. That not a super technical term place for a pedestrian. So we're going to be able to make some changes over there to make the crossings a lot shorter for pedestrians to sort of make it a more logical arrangement at the same time as we do the bikeway improvement. On the Halifax side, we are heavy into the design process for that right now. Working on the flyover to kind of better connect the bikeway to the Gottingen access point. Also looking for some pedestrian improvements as part of that, and also some changes to some of the bus stops in there to sort of help transit prepare for some of the plans that they've got coming up. So that is right now we're trying to get it built for 2022, but that timeline is we still need to do a little bit more design work until we can confirm that. Next slide. And just to kind of give you a sense that those red circled areas are the areas that we're talking about, and when you see it in relation to kind of the overall regional center AAA bikeway network, it's pretty clear. It's right in the middle. it's connected to the McDonald Bridge Bikeway, so it's a really critical part of the overall project to make it safer and more convenient, more comfortable for people who are bicycling in the municipality. It is probably, and I will acknowledge this, it's probably the most expensive part of the work that we're doing. However, it's, we've gone through a lot of the options, and really the best option and the safest option, the most convenient for everybody involved was the flyover option. And you can just sort of see right now the current facilities are obviously not all ages and abilities. Probably the people that we see there in the pictures bicycling are have been doing this a while and are comfortable and able to kind of navigate through these facilities. But really one of our objectives is to get more people bicycling for everyday purposes. And our the work that we're doing with some researchers kind of indicates, if you do a survey of Halifax residents, there's a lot of people who would like to bicycle more, who see themselves bicycling more. And the main impediment that they see is the lack of protected infrastructure, and so that is that's what we're trying to address. Yeah. So, and there's the flyover will not look exactly like that, but it is more or less the place it will be, and the rough length, and I don't think it's going to have a green floor on it, but we promise it will be a million times better than the current access. And also, I should just to mention that the current way that you get on and off the McDonald Bridge will stay. So there'll basically be two ways. You'll be able to access it from down below on Barrington, and then also access it from the top on Gottingen. And the plans that we're working on right now also will offer a way for people who are bicycling on Brunswick Street to find a way up to the access point as well. And there, that's just a little bit of what the intersection of North and Gottingen will look like. Again, we talk a lot about the flyover on this project, but a significant amount of the work will be on sort of the north side of this intersection to make sure that when you get off the flyover, you are then connected to the rest of the developing all ages and abilities cycling network. That's it for that one. So are we? Is there Q&A right now, Siobhan or Chloe?
Here we go. Hi everyone, Siobhan Witherby, Active Transportation Planner, working with David. We do have time allotted to do a quick Q&A session related to this McDonald Bridge Bikeways section that David was just talking about. There is the Q&A on the side that you can type in your questions. We've received a few so far. There's ones about potential greenway lighting and complete streets guide. Maybe we'll save that till the end because that's a little bit more general, but there is a question here that I'll read out for David to answer. One of the participants says, what are some of the factors affecting 2022 or 2023 construction? Is it supply chain for equipment and concrete? Is it remaining design time or staff hours? Thanks. I'll send that to David.
Sure. So whether, I think what I'm interpreting that question is, what are the key factors on whether we would get it built in 2022 or 2023? So we're partway through the design process now, and it's once we get a little bit further along, that will kind of give us kind of a better picture of everything that's involved. So one of the key things that we're trying to do right now is improve the bus stop situation. It kind of gets portrayed as a bicycle project, but making sure that the transit stops are located and relocated in the right spots is one of the things that we're working on. And I would say just overall, it's just a very complex project. It's an extremely busy intersection for all users, regardless. And if we have to make sure that everything is figured out and that we're ready with a construction plan and a mitigation plan to kind of keep people moving during construction. And it's only after we get a few more of those things, those kind of questions answered, that we will know whether we're going to be ready in 2022 or 2023. And the other thing is that we still don't know is whether we can actually build it all in 1 year. So what we might see is some of the preparatory work happening in 2022 and kind of completed in 2023. So that's, I would say that the main factor is just really the complexity of the project, the many factors that we're managing at the intersection, and that's what's driving the timeline, and that's what will help determine, you know, whether we're building 2022 or 2023. And I one other little thing I'm just going to add that I didn't mention is really to acknowledge when we talk about that AAA bikeway network and when we talk about the work that's happening at the McDonald Bridge Bikeway and other side. Halifax is really lucky in that we were successful in an application to the provincial and federal governments for infrastructure funding. So it's going to be overall a $25 million project that, you know, frankly, you know, it wouldn't be difficult for the municipality to fund all this on itself. So I just want to make sure that I acknowledge the contributions of those orders of government and their partnership in helping to make this a reality.
Okay, perfect. We got a few more questions here. It says, do you plan to upgrade the lower access point for the McDonald Bridge, i.e. widen the entrance, remove biohazard, bird poop?
So, yes. So we have, right now, again, the bikeway just sort of ends on a sidewalk, which then transitions to a bus stop. And so there will be some work done there to better separate and to better kind of align and connect to the Barrington Greenway.
Perfect.
The food prep question, I have to, I don't know. There's some interaction with the Bridge Commission. There's like a pipe that drains there. So I will, and I don't think I had the bird poop on my list of things, or our list of things to look at. So that's helpful, and one of the reasons we do these kinds of sessions. So thank you for that.
Perfect. And our next question, did you speak about access to the bridge, or could you speak to access to the bridge on the Dartmouth side? I had heard Lyle Road being talked about at some point, so maybe some clarifications on that.
For sure. So we still have an option. So part of what we need to do on the Dartmouth side is, you know, once you get off the bridge, you then need to be able to connect to facilities that, you know, take you to Dartmouth North and out to Burnside and that direction, connect you to Common, and then, you know, through the Dally Oak Local Street Bikeway project out to Lake Bannock and points beyond that way, and then to downtown Dartmouth and kind of the southern end. And one of our options there was to put a new access point to the Bridge Bikeway at the corner of Lyle and Dixon Street. And that's still an option. It's something that we're going to continue to pursue. However, we are not doing that next year. We need to do a bit more work to understand how we can get a bikeway and pedestrian facilities on Shore Road, which is what that would connect to. So that's not something we'll see in the next as part of the construction next year, but it's still something on our planning and potential construction timeframe in the next few years. In the meantime, we're also kind of looking at what happens to connect into downtown Dartmouth from Thistle Street, potentially playing with some of the Dartmouth Common just on the, like, outside the fence where the parking lot is now, but we're still working to figure out the best way to make that connection to downtown Dartmouth.
Okay, excellent. So that makes up all the questions specific to the McDonald Bridge Bikeway project, so that's good for now. There are some more general questions, but we'll cover those in our larger question period at the end, closer to 8. But for now, we'll hand it over to Megan Backus to do her presentation about the Africville project.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Megan Backus, and tonight I'm going to be presenting to all of you about the Africville Active Transportation Connections project. So we are still in very early stages of this project, but in this presentation, I'll be able to give a very brief history of Africville, some of the project details of what we've done to date, as well as what the project's team's next steps are going to be. And similar to David's presentation, we'll have a bit of time for some Africville specific questions at the end. So this is a very high level history that I feel many people in this session are probably already aware of, but just in case you aren't aware, this will give you a bit of context as I explain the rest of the project. So Africville was predominantly an African Nova Scotian community located on the northern Halifax Peninsula. It was founded by Black Nova Scotians from a variety of origins, but many of them were formerly enslaved African Americans, and it's claimed that Africville is one of the first free Black communities outside of Africa. So it is very extremely significant in Canada's history. And then over the next 100 years since Africville being founded, the community really grew and continued to develop. It was socially a very thriving community, very close-knit, and they had a lot of their own local amenities like a church, local Africville resident-owned businesses. They even had their own hockey team, the Africville Seasiders. However, as this community continued to develop, they were consistently denied municipal services from the former city of Halifax. So services that other parts of the city were getting, like sewer systems, municipal. And then the city continued to rezone the lands and the lands surrounding Africville to more of industrial zones and allowing for uses that weren't really compatible with residential development, including an infectious disease hospital. We had a municipal landfill. In 1955, a railway was approved to cut right through the community, making living conditions really poor for the residents. And then into the late 1960s, the city of Halifax had officially condemned the area under the guise of urban renewal. They relocated the residents living there. They destroyed dwellings. And in part, this was in order to develop for the a.k.a. Bridge, which was about to be constructed, as well as some of the related highway construction that's there in the north end of Halifax. So since then, former residents and activists have begun a very long protest against this treatment and against the condemnation of their community. Moving closer to present day, so we have 1997. Africville was designated as the National Historic Site, commemorating its significance in Canadian human history. And then you can see there on the right, we have former Mayor Peter Kelly giving the Africville apology. So this it acknowledged and formally apologized for the city of Halifax's role in the destruction of Africville. And it also included an agreement to build a replica of the Seaview African United Baptist Church as a museum and interpretive center, which is on the Africville site today. So on to the current situation. There are currently no formally designated ways for someone who is walking, biking, or rolling to access Africville. In order to gain access, currently people are walking along portions of Barrington Street to get to Africville Road. You can see in this picture on the right of the slide, Barrington being the main road and Africville branching off to the right. It's really not a great environment for pedestrians. There are no facilities. There are some sightline issues. I know even using those roads as a motorist, it can be challenging. So, using it as a pedestrian can be very unsafe and uncomfortable. Alternatively, people are using some informal trails that come off of the end of Nova Lee Drive, and go through Africville Lookoff Park, which is on the south end of Barrington Street. But that involves illegally crossing a CN railway that you can see on the left of the slide to come out onto Africville Road. And there is a portion of some type of paved path there. It's not up to our sidewalk standards. You can see it's right up against the street where there's some heavy truck traffic going down Africville Road. So again, not very comfortable or safe for pedestrians. So how did this project get initiated? One of the first components was just some community action. So in 2016, a representative from the Africville Museum brought a petition to council to make Africville more accessible through sidewalks and public transit. When that petition was brought to council, there were about 600 signatures on it, and that petition continues to live on today. And from what I've heard of the director of the Africville Museum, there are over 2,000 signatures on it. So this is a much desired project. And once council received that petition, they directed AT staff to look at the best ways to make these connections using sidewalks or multi-use pathways. And this connection to Africville has also been included in the Integrated Mobility Plan as a segment of the All Ages and Abilities Bicycle Network that David had discussed earlier in his presentation. So you can see the Africville proposed connection right circled in red on the slide. To give you a bit of context on where this project sits in the overall process of active transportation implementation, there are multiple stages to get from that AT facility from the policy on the page onto the ground. And you can see those stages at the bottom of the slide. So I'm currently managing the functional planning stage, which is there highlighted in red. And this stage of the project includes identifying some potential routes in order to make a connection from point A to point B, as well as evaluating those routes based on input from our colleagues, our internal HRM departments, engagement with the public, engagement with key stakeholders, all that information gathering. And then through that evaluation, preferred route or routes are determined. And then there's the preparation of an actual functional design. So a 30% drawing, getting that all that information into a design that we can bring to council for some approval. And then it gets officially taken off the active transportation planning team's plate into more of the engineering design stage. However, as the planners on the project, we do continue to advise on that project and really follow its progress into that eventual construction stage. So this is the study area. Is at the tip of the Halifax Peninsula, but the study area has been zoomed out so that we can look at how we can connect into next slide, please. Have the preliminary route options that are being considered at this point in the project. So number one, we have a multi-use pathway on Barrington Street, and that would be starting at Niobe Gate, so where the Barrington Greenway currently ends, and going all the way out to Africville Road and to the Africville Museum. Option number two is considering a connection from the end of Nova Lee Drive through those trails that I had mentioned in Africville Lookoff Park to the Africville Museum. And third, we have a connection along the former rail corridor parallel to Memorial Drive. So these options are currently being discussed and reviewed internally for their suitability and feasibility. So yeah, these AT projects are never easy. One of the big considerations for this project is building some trust in the community. So from understanding the history of Africville, you can probably understand that there is a feeling of distrust in the community of Africville's former residents and descendants when it comes to planning projects with HRM. So a big part of this project is building some good relationships in the community, to ensure that we're able to do this project with voices of the Africville community being heard and reflected in that final design. There's a lot of consideration around land ownership. So surrounding Africville Park, there are a variety of landowners that all have plans for the future of their property. So we have like CN Rail, Halifax Harbor Bridges, and Port Authority are all around there. So they really need to be, kept in the loop on this project, as well as in the future, we may need to be discussing land acquisition, depending on what facility we end up moving forward with. We have CN Rail going through the study area, which is just another challenge. We have to look at how we can potentially have a facility near the rail or potentially crossing over it. So there's safety to think about there, as well as having it actually approved by CN. And then there are just some other existing conditions for the study area that are challenging. So we're working with some steep grades. I mentioned there are some sight lines on Barrington Street and Africville Road that are a little bit sketchy right now that we'd have to consider. As well, there are heavy volumes of truck traffic. So we're surrounded by these industrial uses. There's a lot of heavy trucks going through the area. So for an estimated timeline, as I mentioned, we're currently in the functional planning stage of the project, and we're aiming to have that complete by later this year. But then there will be a couple of years of that design process to get refine our functional design into something that will eventually be detailed engineered drawings that can be ready for construction. And right now that construction date is estimated to be around 2024, 2025. So the project team, we're currently still in that route identification and evaluation stage, still gathering a lot of information to see what our best options are going to be. We're also coordinating with the Windsor Street Exchange redevelopment project team because these projects are in such close proximity to each other. We want to make sure that both our engagement processes as well as our future designs can work well together. And for next steps, we're going to be going out and re-engaging with some of the Africville community stakeholders, some of the community groups that are out there to get some of their feedback on the work we've done so far. And then we're going to be rolling out with some public engagement. So we want our engagement to really reach out to the Africville community specifically, as well as be able to go out to the greater community that's living along some of these potentially affected corridors. Thank you so much. So I think we'll have questions if anyone has some.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. I'm looking into the Q&A chat on the side right now, and there aren't any specific questions for the Africville project. If you have them, type them in now. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. If not, we'll kind of keep things rolling along to Mark's presentation, and we can cover them at the end.
Yeah, I'll be here at the end of the presentation as well. So.
Okay. Nothing quite yet, so maybe we'll move on to Mark's part of the presentation.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Go for it, Mark. And Mark, you are muted.
Sorry, bad start.
There we go, good.
Thanks, Siobhan, and welcome to everyone out there in the virtual world. I wish I could see you and make this a bit more interactive, but I guess we'll make the best of the virtual webinar environment. I'm also an active transportation planner with the AT group, and I'm going to talk to you about the shared micromobility readiness study that I'm leading. The photo on the screen right now is a photo that I took down on Hollis Street just last summer. And so, even during the pandemic, it wasn't hard to capture a photo with that included people riding e-scooters. If you've spent any time downtown in the last couple of years in the spring or summer, you've probably seen people riding these vehicles around on streets and in bike lanes and on sidewalks. So there's really no doubt that that shared micromobility, at least in the form of e-scooters, has arrived in Halifax, kind of ready or not. And this project really is about figuring out, HRM's vision for the future of micromobility, kind of asking the question, what role do we want these vehicles to play in our transportation system? What kinds of services do we think would benefit residents, and how would we go about best implementing those? Next slide, please. So, yeah, what is shared micromobility? We used to talk about bike share exclusively, and now the industry term is micromobility or shared micromobility, which is basically an umbrella term for light single occupant vehicles that operate generally as a fleet and are available to the public for use. Most micromobility systems today are bike share and or e-scooter share services. E-scooters are electric scooters, the ones that you saw in that photo at the beginning of the presentation. Most contemporary systems frequently include electric assist bicycles in addition to traditional pedal bikes. These have actually become very popular in the cities where they are offered. I've got a few interesting statistics to share with you. In 2019, 136 million trips were taken via shared micromobility in the US, which was a 60% increase in the number of trips taken in 2018. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen the micromobility industry and landscape change significantly, but it was in 2018 that we saw the biggest change with the widespread launch of scooter share systems in around 100 US cities. Scooters in 2018 accounted for 38.5 million trips. And in Canada, we have seen systems that have operated or continue to operate in Vancouver, Kelowna, Calgary, Edmonton, region of Waterloo, Hamilton, London, Windsor, Ottawa, and Montreal. Next slide, please. So as part of this project, we've looked at the three, in addition to looking at e-scooters, we've looked at the three dominant bike share technologies in the industry. These include dock-based equipment. These were the first types of bike share systems that we saw in cities worldwide that include modular docking stations and kiosks that are sometimes powered by solar power. The stations can be installed and moved quickly, relatively quickly as needed. But you have to go to a dock to actually to sign out a bike or retrieve a bike or return a bike. Then came dockless smart bike equipment. So these are bicycles that are typically locked to themselves, just using a ring lock on the back wheel. All of the technology, the GPS and the computer and everything are on the individual bikes as opposed to the dock or kiosk. And these bikes generally can be parked anywhere within the service area. And now there's also what are referred to as a lock-to smart bike equipment, also referred to as hybrid systems. So these are bicycles that can be parked within a service area, not necessarily at a dock, but they do have to be locked to some kind of a fixed object, or such as a bike rack, an existing bike rack, or perhaps a designated bike corral. Next slide, please. So, staff received direction to move forward with this study from both a 2019 Transportation Standing Committee motion and also Action 88 from the Integrated Mobility Plan. The TSC motion asked for an information report on third-party docked and dockless bike share and scooter share, really looking for sort of a high-level analysis of the kind of current status of legislation and regulations in HRM and what that would mean for a scooter share or bike share system operator. That report is actually due, I think, to come forward to the TSC later at this month's meeting. So council will have an opportunity to have some discussion based on the information in that report. And then also Action 88 of the Integrated Mobility Plan directs us to complete a bicycle share feasibility study, which became the micro-mobility readiness study, so that we could better respond to the current state of the industry. So we expanded the scope from just bike share to also include other technologies. Next slide, please. So we began our planning process in the fall of 2019 with stakeholder and public engagement. We've worked through the various phases of the project and completed the market analysis, the financial analysis, and we're actually now close to wrapping up the project, and we'll be reviewing a final report from the consultants over the next few weeks. The project team includes our consultants from Alta Planning and Design, which is a firm based in the US, but with offices in Canada, and they have extensive experience with micromobility projects across North America. We've also been guided by a steering committee consisting of HRM staff from a variety of different municipal departments. Next slide, please. So early in the project, working with the steering committee, we developed this draft vision statement, which was meant to be kind of some high-level direction for the project, help kind of guide where we would go with the development of micromobility and HRM, and we shared this with the public for feedback as part of our public engagement process through an online survey posted to the Shape Your City website back in December of 2019. I won't read that for you now, but hopefully you've had enough time to give it a quick review. It's also available on the project page on Shape Your City, halifax.ca. Next slide, please. And then to support that vision, we also developed a number of principles and associated goals, working with the steering committee again. So our principles include connect people and places, strengthen public health and safety, advance environmental sustainability, make it accessible, and ensure a high quality public experience. And we have a number of goals to support each of those principles. And the idea is that any recommendations flowing from this project should align with the project vision statement and these principles. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of what we heard back from residents who responded to our survey. We had the survey posted online for about 3 weeks in December of 2019. We had just over 1,100 respondents to the survey. We had really good support from people overall for the vision statement and the principles and goals. And we asked the question, would you use a shared micromobility service, and if so, which kind would you use? And the pie chart there, you know, illustrates the responses there. So quite a lot of interest demonstrated in bike share and in both bike share and e-scooter share systems. We also received many comments and various opinions and perspectives on several topics, including safety. People landed on, you know, both sides of this, you know, of this debate. Some folks wanted to make sure that helmets were required and provided with the vehicles. Others suggested that helmets should not be required for shared micromobility. We had folks saying that we need more bike lanes and AAA facilities to encourage more use of micromobility systems. Yeah, we had a wide range of comments, but overall, good support for the vision, principles, and goals. Next slide, please. We also had a number of meetings and discussions with external stakeholders, including you know, business owners and bike shop owners, the operator of the existing e-scooter business in Halifax, as well as some other operators that have expressed some interest in coming to Halifax. These are some of the major themes that emerged from those conversations. Again, safety, the need to have some clarity around the regulation of micromobility vehicles, especially e-scooters. Definitely interested in making sure that whatever system we do implement, if we implement one, that it's affordable and accessible for a wide range of people. The need to integrate with other modes of transportation, especially transit. Some debate about whether or not a system should be focused on providing service to residents versus visitors. Discussion about, you know, where service should or could be provided. And again, good support from stakeholders for the vision, principles, and goals. And overall, it seemed like the vision, principles, and goals aligned well with the goals of stakeholders that we met with. Next slide, please. The project team and the steering committee placed a strong emphasis on bringing an equity lens to this work. This was reinforced by what we heard both from stakeholders and the public. You'll see that in these two principles and associated goals, there is a focus on providing an affordable and inclusive system. Next slide, please. There's also strong direction to apply an equity lens from the Integrated Mobility Plan, Action 71, and several other HRM policies, including HRM's new social policy. So the, you know, this equity lens really played a big role in the market analysis component of the project. So in completing this component of the component, we looked at both equity, you know, the need to provide service to communities and areas where there are high equity concerns, and also potential demand. And we tried to look at both of those inputs into the analysis as equal inputs. So we worked on mapping areas of high equity need, first by mapping out the Canadian Index of Multiple Deprivation, which I won't get into that in great detail, but it is basically what it does is it identifies communities with high equity concerns using various census data at the dissemination area census level. We also mapped out communities with relatively high concentrations of African Nova Scotians as well. And so these are the data layers that we applied to our market analysis mapping process. So, you know, in some cases, areas with equity concerns are going to overlap or do overlap with areas of high potential demand, but there may also be areas where equity needs to be a more prominent consideration, where the potential demand isn't necessarily there based on the criteria like existing AAA infrastructure or high population density, but there may be a high equity need there, a gap in the transportation options, and so we'll have to be considerate of that as we sort of interpret the results of our market analysis. Next slide, please. So we created a heat map to identify potential hotspots for shared micromobility, and I'm going to show you that next. So we gathered a whole variety of different types of data to build up layers to create this map. We looked at basically all of these factors here: where people live, where people work, where people study, where people shop, where people take transit, some key destinations and amenities, and also where we have existing cycling infrastructure, such as protected bikeways and multi-use pathways. Next slide, please. So bringing all that data together into one map gives us this composite demand analysis map, and this is going to serve as a tool in the future as we figure out where potential micromobility service areas should be. We started originally with using the urban transit service boundary as a boundary for this analysis, and then after having mapped out the areas of high equity concern, decided to expand that boundary to include some of the communities kind of outside of the urban core, outside of the regional center, and then from there we buffered out 2 kilometers beyond that to create our study area for this demand analysis. Next slide, please. So obviously things are changing quickly in this industry, and the pandemic had a big impact on shared micromobility systems. And many of those systems had to figure out how to react and respond quickly to the health concerns related to the pandemic. Some of them, I think had to shut down briefly, but overall, I think they've been seen as a necessary service, and cities have found ways to continue to operate their systems safely. Overall, in the industry, we are seeing an increase in procured bike share systems. So, there was a period a few years ago where the private operators were sort of keen to come to cities and provide bike share systems basically at no cost to the city. But that business model hasn't really worked out the way that they had expected, and e-scooters also have grabbed a big part of the business for private operators. They're much more interested now in operating e-scooters than they are operating bike share systems. So cities that do want to implement bike share systems are now looking to procure their own systems. And this could mean, you know, buying and owning the equipment, but there are also turnkey bike share system options now where you can go to a private operator of a system, and they basically, you know, they'll supply for a price. Obviously, they'll provide a system and manage the system and do the maintenance for you. Most cities are still just permitting e-scooters and not procuring them as part of their micromobility systems. And there are still some new operators, you know, coming onto the scene, but there's also a lot of consolidation of private operators across the industry as well. And final slide, please. So our next steps to wrap this project up are to review our final report, gather some feedback on that from our steering committee, and likely later this year, we will be going to regional council with possibly with some recommendations on how we might proceed with a shared micromobility system in HRM, and looking for some direction and guidance from regional council. We haven't really had any discussions yet at the council level on what types of service we could or should be offering to HRM residents. So that's a discussion that still needs to happen at council, and we'll be looking for some guidance on them this year. So thanks very much, and I'll pass it back to Siobhan.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. So if you have any questions about Mark's shared micromobility presentation, type them into the Q&A chat on the side and we'll try and address them. So far, we just have one. The question is, micromobility, seasonal or year-round?
Okay, seasonal or year-round? That's a good question. So our direction from the integrated mobility plan is to encourage year-round cycling as a transportation option. Certainly, a bike share system can operate year-round, and in some cities they do. You know, bikes can be safely used in the winter if the infrastructure is there and the maintenance is there. That's what Winter Bike Week is all about, is promoting winter cycling. E-scooters generally are not available during the winter months. In winter cities, they're removed from service and then brought back into service the following year, and in the spring, summer, and fall. They're just not a safe vehicle to be operating in winter conditions. And I think there's probably, you know, many challenges just from a technology perspective, you know, in terms of battery life and durability of the equipment and all of that. So I think it's certainly possible for bike share, not so much for e-scooter share.
Okay, that's great. So that's the only question that I'm seeing specific to the micromobility. If you have any more, type them in the chat and we'll address them. But now I guess we can transition into our more general Q&A period. We've been collecting a few questions and I'll try and go in order so we can address these moving forward. First one, a participant asks, as the greenways, for example, Dartmouth Great Trail, are reconsidered, is lighting a part of this? So whoever wants to jump in, I encourage you to unmute your mic and I'll put the camera to you. But are we considering lighting as part of our greenways moving forward?
So Siobhan, I can take that one, and I can say that we are starting to explore it. I think there, you know, we've had a focus on trying to make some of these connections and acquire land and, build up the network. But it, I guess one of the positives is people are using them, and people are using them at all times of day, and all times of year, including darker times of year. So there's a couple of spots that we've heard a lot about, and that we are going to start looking into. It's probably not soon, I'll tell you that right now, but we have to explore the options, costs, that kind of thing. And if there, we've heard about the Dartmouth Common, we've heard about the Dartmouth Harbourfront Greenway, any place basically that's not, on a street where there's kind of street lights already there. So we're aware, and it's something that we realize that we need to do some work on.
Perfect. Thank you, David. This next question, the person asks, can you talk about the proposed Complete Streets guidelines and what kinds of changes there are from the current municipal design guidelines?
I can, I'll start that. I mean, it's a big topic, so it's kind of hard to give a detailed answer on that one. I will say, so like many municipalities, HRM has what we call our municipal design guidelines. It's called the Red Book. And like a lot of transportation practice and engineering and planning practice that's developed over the past 50 years, quite autocentric. So really, a lot of it is focusing on moving vehicles, and it has been updated, since let's say about 2013, 2014. And part of the reason that it hasn't been updated is because of the magnitude of the job, to sort of take it from where it is now to sort of something that really reflects the integrated mobility plan, that reflects the industry, the transportation sector right now, and the types of guidelines that are coming out. So we started the process, and instead of called the Red Book, it's going to be called the Complete Street Guidelines. It will be an evergreen document that we add to and improve over time, on a regular basis, now that we're going to kind of have a new framework from which to begin. And it will attempt to kind of set a tone that reflects kind of our multimodal policy direction forward. It will reflect, certainly the new bicycle facility designs that are coming out, new transit kind of designs and facilities that we're starting to see. And it will kind of incorporate, just sort of it's kind of a unique document in that it's got, very technical sorts of content, drawings and templates and that kind of thing. But on the other hand, it kind of sets the tone in a certain way to the approach that planners and designers should be taking to when it comes to like deciding what happens in the right of way, what happens in that public space between the private property. I believe that the timeline to take that to council is getting close. I think it's the spring. We don't lead that project. We advise on it, and they seek our feedback. But it's it's part of the municipality's sort of general approach to shifting how we plan, design, maintain, operate, and recapitalize, kind of the whole kind of sequence there, our transportation system. And it should be, I think the guidelines, like when that goes to council, it'll be available for everyone to see. I think we shared a draft with stakeholder groups a couple of weeks ago, and so folks have had an opportunity so stakeholders at least to weigh in on it. And what encourages me most about it is that it's a starting point, and it's something that we're going to build on. And I guess just one other thing about it is that it's a guide. It's not and it's a reference. We still will be referring to professional guidelines and best practices that we see in other jurisdictions. So it's not like it restrains us, but it helps set the tone, and it's going to help us, I think, bring our transportation system, up to 2021 and beyond standards.
Perfect. Thank you, David. It's a really exciting time, and these are good questions. I'll jump into our next one. What kind of lessons are learned from tactical interventions as opposed to interim ones? Do you have any specific examples of a tactical intervention that has changed during the process of tactical to interim or permanent?
Great question. I can't think right now of any place where we've made that transition yet. We have gone from our tactical program started 2 years ago with a couple of bump boats, one in Dartmouth and oh yes, I can give you an example. So first point is not very many examples yet because we've just started the tactical program in the last 2 or 3 years. Usually we say that those interventions are going to be there for 1 to 3 years, and we're kind of trying to put them in, kind of knowing that there's going to be projects coming down the line to kind of make the permanent infrastructure. So a good example of that one is what's happened up in the area of Young K Islesville. So K Street and that intersection are going to be dug up sometime in the next 2 or 3 years. We know that Halifax Water has interest there. We know that we're going to install the North End Local Street Bikeway through there. We know that K Street's too wide, so there's opportunities to change it. So we'll have an opportunity over the next couple of years just to kind of see how that works and change it. The example, I think it was the very first time that we did a tactical intervention and we used Jersey barriers, was at the corner of Coburg Road and Roby Street. I'm forgetting the name of the church that's there, St. Andrews. Anyway, I'm not sure the name of the church.
Yeah.
St. Andrews, okay.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of a weird kind of a slip lane that was there to, instead of if you were driving or bicycling east on Coburg, just before you got to Roby, there was a way you could kind of, and you wanted to turn right onto Roby, you could go through there. The challenge with it was a really awkward pedestrian crossing. There was some sightline issues. There was there was kind of cars just weren't, it wasn't really designed to sort of like signal to cars that they need to yield for pedestrians there in a big picture. So for I think a year or so, there was some Jersey barriers there to kind of shorten the crossing distance and play with the geometry. But then when we rebuilt it, we actually kind of put the curb right across that kind of slip lane there. And now if you're a car going through there, you kind of have to go up and over. So it's intended to kind of reflect the priority that we want to give pedestrians there. That's the one that comes to mind.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to move on to the next question. It is about snow. So it says that we've got snow in Halifax, often a bunch. Is your planning linked in with maintenance, for example, snow clearing, de-icing, etc., and signage and communication with users and car drivers?
So partially. Others can weigh in on this. I don't have to answer all the questions. So when we know, for example, when we are designing a protected bike lane, we know how wide our equipment is, and it has to be at least 1.7 meters wide for the equipment that we've got to clear them to fit through it. There are certain facilities that our colleagues in maintenance kind of like better than others, just because they're easier to clear and find snow storage. So for example, the type of bike lanes that are on the new bike lanes that just were finished on South Park Street between Spring Garden Road and Sackville Street are up at the same level as the sidewalk. And those are easier to plow and to store the snow, whereas the ones that are down at ground level, like the interim bike lanes on Hollis Street, are a little bit more of a challenge. Now, if we, for the last winter we had them in, we didn't have a big winter in terms of snow. So for the most part, we were able to keep those clear, and we're able to avoid having to remove snow from the street, which is kind of a high cost endeavor. When we take a project to council, for example, we have to tell council, yeah, it's going to cost X $100,000 to build it, but also we're going to have to budget about $7,000 a kilometer for the rest of time to kind of maintain it. Those kinds of things. So those are all of our plans. Our colleagues who are responsible for leaves and snow clearing and all that kind of stuff review them and give us feedback. So yeah, that's kind of where that's sort of what our involvement is with that side of municipal operations.
Great. This next one is more of a comment than a question. The participant says, I'm worried about silos in HRM ... So I don't know if someone wants to talk about how we're working to break down those silos related to our specific AT planning projects.
I'll go. You guys can fill in. So I think one thing that's common, or Megan, I don't know, Megan, why don't you talk a little bit about the Africville project and maybe some of the various groups that we're engaging with there internally to, I'll lead it off by saying that every single one of our projects has kind of an internal advisory committee, so that, if our facility involves going through a park, we've got someone from parks there. We have people from traffic. So I understand the comment about silos. I feel like it feels like someone externally can come in and evaluate us, but we I think we do a pretty good job kind of working internally to make sure that we are collaborating with our colleagues across different business units. But Megan, I don't know, there was a meeting a couple of weeks ago where talking about Africville, where it was a whole bunch of people from lots of different places.
Yeah, I mean, so for Africville, we do have this, an internal committee where we have all of various departments within HRM discussing, maybe information that they've learned through doing projects in the area, things that are currently going on, different opportunities and constraints. Specifically in this area, we going out with active transportation to Africville was a little bit of a challenge because the community was looking for, for example, some other access, they had some other issues around access to the site that they were concerned with. And you might remember in the slide that I put up, they were talking about getting like sidewalks and transit. So if we were going out with just AT, we didn't know if we would be as successful engaging the community in that discussion. So instead, we wanted to take a step back and work with a group of some other departments that we could go back to the community with a broader discussion on what access would look like. So that's, one of the ways that we included transit in that conversation included the Windsor Street Exchange in there, talking to the Parks and Rec department because it's currently the Africville Park, and talking about what plans are expected for that site. So yeah, just another example of how we're working together in kind of these smaller committees to ensure that our projects are being integrated and coordinated, and that we're sharing that information of what's happened in the past as well as what we're currently working on.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. While we have you and David, there are two questions that are similar within the chat, and they're related to the Africville project and how it will be impacted by the replacement of the McKay Bridge. I'll read out one of them specifically. How does the reconstruction of the McKay Bridge impact the project? Has there been any movement from the Halifax Bridge Commission to be a part of this, both in planning, financially, etc., especially considering their historical role?
Yeah, very topical question. So in the early stages of the AT project, so Halifax Harbor Bridges were engaged as a stakeholder, and those meetings we were made aware that there were going to be some plans to be starting, the bridge replacement or bridge planning process. And then we also knew that there was a feasibility study being completed, like an engineering feasibility study. However, the release of information maybe almost a week ago now, so that was a surprise to me. I heard it live on CBC in the morning. So yeah, I was aware that there was this feasibility study and that process was kind of ramping up. I wasn't aware that the recommended option that they were going to be discussing was building a new bridge north of the existing bridge on Africville land. So that was what was recommended by their consultant in that feasibility study. And I mean, this is an engineering-based study, so I don't know if that recommendation was made with any type of lens of like a social or a cultural lens to it. And I think it was more strictly feasibility from an engineering standpoint. And I'm not entirely sure what level of discussion that Halifax Bridges have had with the Africville community. From just what I saw in the media, it seems like a lot of people were taken by surprise by the announcement. So, I mean, HRM will have a role in that bridge planning process once the process eventually gets started. And I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know if that recommended option is going to be what they ultimately move forward with. I think that if they're aiming for a successful project and planning process, they would really need to keep the Africville community involved in these decisions and have a conversation with them, just given the history that their community has had with the bridge projects in the past. The announcement coming out, it might be a bit detrimental to our relationship building as far as the planning project to Africville. And I think one of the last questions was about them having a larger role. So, we haven't had a discussion with Halifax Bridges about having like a larger role in our planning process. Like I said, that announcement was new, so I'm sure there's going to be some further conversations had, and same with like financially contributing. That might be a discussion that comes up in the future, depending on how their plans move forward, but none of that has happened to date.
Great, thank you, Megan.
Just kind of as a general, I think everybody more or less knows, but in Halifax we've got provincially owned roads, municipally owned roads, and the Bridge Commission. So there's and even like port owned roads. So coordination amongst all of us is something that we're continually working on and trying to get right. And it's an ongoing process. And Halifax Harbor Bridges has been, supportive of, for example, the McDonald Bridge Bikeway Connectors project, and are, one of the groups that we, obviously collaborate with, and in the Africville area, they're one of like some really, like CN and the Port Authority and the provincial government who all kind of have land and activities and plans, in that area as well. So one of the challenges with these types of planning projects is how to factor all of those in order to come out with a project that we're pushing, to make it safer and easier to walk and bike. But it's a big part of it is working with all those other partners.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to this next question. It starts with a statement: we appreciate and support HRM initiatives to improve the bike network. The question: is there a plan to provide a safe bike route from South Park and/or Hollis all the way down to Point Pleasant Park?
I can take that question, Siobhan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it, Mark.
We'll give it to Mark.
So the answer to that question is yes, there is a plan. The Active Transportation Priorities Plan identifies a connection from South Park all the way to Point Pleasant along Yonge Street. And we also plan to extend the Hollis Street bike lane south of South Street and all the way around to connect up to Barrington. We don't have a plan currently for a connection beyond that, but the connection from South Park at Inglis down to Point Pleasant Park is in the AT plan. We haven't initiated a planning process for that segment yet. It's not one of the priority segments in the integrated mobility plan, so I can't speak to where it sits in our work plan at the moment. Dave might be able to add something to that, but the connection is planned. Yes. Dave, do you want to add anything?
Just that I know that Yonge Avenue is one of those streets that is up for some rehabilitation work in the sort of next 3 or 4 years, and so that would be when we would look for an opportunity to potentially make some improvements there. Right now, what is proposed in the AT plan is kind of a local street bikeway facility, so kind of a traffic calmed route through, but we need to do some more planning just to make sure that is the right facility for that kind of a street. So there's still some more work to do.
I can also chime in on this a little bit. In my involvement with the Halifax Urban Greenway Association, at one point they were talking with CN and the port about a potential connection down from Terminal Road through Marginal Road to Point Pleasant Drive. There is that sort of roadway connection through the rail yards in the port that is relatively quiet, but there are sometimes heavier vehicles and trains coming across there. I don't know, I don't believe they had made too much progress yet, but it's something that could be kind of considered in the future as a connection if you are coming from the Hollis Street area. All right, so I will move on to the next question. Are there any plans to continue the Harbourfront multi-use pathway from Woodside to Alderney, further in North Dartmouth? It's a historically underserviced and underrepresented area, and also a good chance to connect with the Shannon Park redevelopment.
I'll take a stab at that, Siobhan.
Sure.
David here. So kind of two answers. So right now between the Woodside Ferry Terminal and Alderney Landing, we have 2 gaps. So one gap is between Parker Street and Old Ferry Road, and we've got a detailed design for that right now. We have 2 landowners that we need to acquire permissions from. We have permissions from one of them, and we're working on the other. So so that's going reasonably well, but so that's kind of that little segment between just above the cove, almost the Develop Nova Scotia project there on the harbor front. The next section is near Kings Wharf Place. So right now, as you approach Kings Wharf, or if you're coming from the south going towards Alderney Landing, you kind of end up at Kings Wharf Place, and it's an awkward crossing. And then you go across, and it's sort of a parking lot, and so we have to, that will get. We've been waiting for a sort of an integration opportunity with the developer there, kind of related to what's happening at Kings Wharf, and so we might have to do something sooner. So anyway, that's a gap. We've got different opportunities to fix that up. And then again, so then the other gap is from Alderney Landing up to kind of Gary Street, or you could even extend it up a little bit to the top of the hill. And again, we've got plans, but we need a bit of property. And again, we're in negotiations with that. As you get to the other side, let's say kind of north from where the bridge is there, we haven't done a lot of work on how to make that connection there. There's a piece of D&D land that's kind of right under the bridge, and next to it, that's a barrier. On the other side of that, there's actually like a long waterfront corridor that is on top of Halifax water pipes. But then you get to the point to the power plant there, so it's not easy, and we haven't done a whole lot of work on it. The other opportunity through there might be in looking at Windmill Road. Our colleagues in the Strategic Transportation Planning Department are going to start a larger kind of multimodal look at Windmill Road, and one of the goals of that would be to have like a safe, protected bicycle facility on Windmill Road. So that might be the way that we make the connection up to the Shannon Park lands and into Burnside as well, and maybe even eventually on a kind of a reconfigured Windmill Road in Burnside and up and over the Magazine Hill. There was a report to council that talked about that last year. So there's some high-level plans, I guess, is the answer, but nothing focused and kind of near term, at least right now.
Great, thank you, David. We recognize that we're a little bit over time right now, so we've got one last question and then we will wrap it up quickly. This one's related to snow clearing. The attendee says, Monday's storm, lots of grade F on snow clearance, even today as of 3 p.m. on South Park Street.
Well, I've just kind of been getting a little, so we don't work directly on snow clearing, that kind of thing. So I don't have an answer specifically on that. I understand that there was a number of our clearing equipment, a large percentage of it actually went down on Sunday and Monday. So I think the city owns 13 plow. Anyway, I'm not going to give an answer because I don't know the exact. Anyway, so we have a challenge right now. We got a lot of snow at once. So anytime we get a lot of snow at once, our snow clearing standards are difficult to follow. We had equipment malfunctions, so that's something that we're dealing with right now. I think we're trying to rent some equipment and get it out there and get things cleared up as quickly as possible. I'd say in general on bike lane clearing, we're on a bit of a learning curve in terms of how best to do it. I think from what I've heard, it's generally okay when the snow amounts are modest, but certainly from some of the pictures I've seen, there's still quite a bit of work to do on some of our facilities once our crews can get to them. So sorry, I don't have an exact timeline right now on when they'll be dealt with, but that's where it stands right now.
Great, thank you, David. So I'm just going to flash this information slide up on the screen for everyone. You can do maybe a quick wrap up, and then we'll head out for the night.
Okay. Okay, Mark Neener wants me to make it clear to everybody that the $25 million infrastructure project that I mentioned is for the entire regional center AAA bikeway network, not just the McDonald Bridge access project. So that money is to build facilities in Dartmouth and all over Halifax and in connecting out to the outskirts as well. So just as a point of information. And I guess on behalf of the HRM crew here tonight that you can see and that you can't see, thanks everybody for coming out and for participating in this. We're always happy to. We like the dialogue. There's lots to talk about in this area, and the more that we can share information back and forth, I think the better it is for everybody. It's a big job. It's a challenging kind of job to kind of transition our streets, especially, I don't know if I should say especially in a city like Halifax, but I think in an older city like Halifax with various challenges, it's even more interesting, but we think we're making headway. We appreciate the support of folks and their patience, and it's exciting. It's gratifying, one, to see some of these facilities come into being. It's really even better to kind of see them be used. Like we were looking at we have bike sensors now. We're actually counting the bikes in real time. and being able to see the use, for example, on South Park Street in the middle of winter has been super encouraging. So if there's any people who are attending tonight or bicycling all year round, thank you. And we hope that maybe not in the last few days, but we hope that you've been enjoying the facilities and telling your friends about them. And there's going to be lots more good stuff coming in the pipe. So thanks to everybody. And final, check out other events that the Halifax Cycling Coalition is organizing this week for Winter Bike Week. And I think that's it. Thanks to everybody, and thanks to my colleagues who put this together. And have a good night.